One night in August 2016, Kyoya was on a bus heading to his parents' house. Since he could not sleep, he pulled out his phone and started watching an official stream from Succeedsoft. During the stream, Succeedsoft announced the launch of a new game. Kyoya was surprised to learn that the scenario for the game was written by Koego Kyuichi, the theme song was performed by Nana, and the character designs were created by Akishi Mashino. The three of them were known as stars of the Platinum Generation. Kyoya was certain the production cost for the game must have been huge and the reaction from fans would be incredible. Kyoya had always loved games, anime, and light novels, and he had dreamed of working in that industry. In the past, he quit his office job and joined a Bisujo game development company, but the reality was far harsher than he had imagined. The games they made did not sell, and the company eventually shut down. By the next morning, the bus reached its destination. Kyoya got off and continued his trip on foot. At 28 years old, he was still single and broke. He had lost his job and could not pay his rent, so he used the little money he had left to buy a ticket to his parents' home. After arriving, he immediately lay down in his old room. At that time, he had no job and had tried many different roles, from directing to video editing, image editing, art assistance, sub-scenario writing, and even logo design, but none of them had led anywhere. While browsing through Aki's character designs on his phone, Kyoya admired how amazing they looked. Suddenly, he received a call from his younger sister, Miyoko. She said she had found something while going through his old belongings, an acceptance letter from an art school. She told him she would bring it over. The discovery brought back memories of the time when Kyoya had been unsure about which school to choose. He once had the chance to pick between an economics program at a regular school and a visual arts program at an art school. His admiration for creators had pushed him to take the art school entrance exam just for the experience, and he actually passed. However, he never enrolled because he lacked confidence in becoming a creator. Kyoya could not help but imagine what might have happened if he had chosen the art school back then. The Platinum Generation members were all around his age, so if he had attended that school, he might have become someone like them. He even wondered if it would ever be possible to return to that time. As Kyoya drifted to sleep, Miyoko's voice woke him up. She handed him the letter and left. At that moment, Kyoya realized he could never go back to the past. All he could do was start searching for a job again. One night in September 2016, Kyoya was walking through the city after receiving yet another rejection message from a company he had applied to. His situation felt painfully unlucky. While crossing a bridge, he noticed a girl standing alone. She looked lonely, and when she began taking off her shoes, Kyoya panicked. Thinking she might be in danger, he shouted and ran toward her, pulling her back to safety. Later that night, they talked at a cafe. The girl introduced herself as Eiko. Kyoya apologized repeatedly, explaining that he thought she might have been trying to harm herself. Eiko was surprised and asked if she had really looked like someone with that intention. Feeling awkward, Kyoya admitted that she simply seemed lonely. Eiko eventually shared that she was dealing with a serious problem at work. One of her staff members had suddenly left during a critical time. It turned out that Eiko worked at a game development company and was searching for someone who could handle direction, image, and video editing and had general knowledge of web development. Kyoya said he might be able to help with those tasks. After a brief conversation, Eiko asked him to come to her office the next day. The following morning, Kyoya went to the address Eiko had given him. He was stunned when he arrived and saw that it was the headquarters of Succeedsoft. He lightly slapped his own cheeks to motivate himself, realizing this could be the chance of a lifetime. He then walked toward the building of Development Group 2. Inside, Kyoya met Eiko again. She greeted him warmly and introduced herself formally as the leader of Succeedsoft's second development group. Kyoya greeted her politely and could not hide his amazement. Even though Eiko might be younger than him, she was already leading a team, a remarkable achievement compared to where he was in life. Eiko explained what his work would involve and led him to the materials room, a space used to store reference items for new projects. The room was messy because of a shortage of staff. She told Kyoya that his first assignment was to organize the entire room. Although it sounded like a tough task, Kyoya was grateful to have found a new job. He immediately started sorting through the folders on the computer, arranging them in a clear order. By the end of the day, he had accomplished a lot, organizing files with both numbers and letters for easy identification, creating digital backups, storing printed copies on shelves, labeling toys and figurines, and logging everything into the computer. When Eiko checked the room, she admitted that Kyoya's work had exceeded her expectations. One day in September 2016, one of Kyoya's co-workers asked him for help to speak with a writer over the phone, saying that Kyoya's gentle and thoughtful approach was exactly what they needed. His presence in the office was truly helpful to everyone around him. His work results were excellent and always met the targets, and he never hesitated to lend a hand to others. Eiko felt genuinely happy to see him there. That evening, Eiko invited Kyoya out for dinner. She admitted that she was glad because back then, she once mistook Kyoya for someone who was about to jump off a bridge. They both smiled as they recalled that moment. Eiko explained that during that time, she had been dealing with a lot of worries and had grown tired of everything. She shared how the social game developers considered her team a budget burden and even disrupted their progress. Kyoya was surprised that anyone would do such a thing, especially since the project that year was such a major one. According to Eiko, some people simply didn't want to celebrate, and to those who didn't care, an anniversary might have felt like a pointless event. Eiko wanted to make sure the project would run smoothly because it was a significant collaboration with the Platinum Generation. She admitted that Kyoya's arrival at Succeed Soft had been a huge help to her. Kyoya told her that the project was very special to him as well. When Eiko noticed the wallpaper on Kyoya's phone, she immediately understood how much he admired the art of Akishima Sino. Eiko expressed her hope that Kyoya could become a permanent employee. According to his contract, after 6 months of work, he would be eligible for a full-time position. She also believed that Kyoya must be eager to meet the members of the Platinum Generation someday. One day in November 2016, while Kyoya was working, he overheard his co-workers talking about a delayed script. Suddenly, Eiko gathered all the employees to announce that the Platinum Project had been frozen by a decision from the board of directors. Shocked, Kyoya asked why such a thing had happened. Eiko apologized, saying there was little she could do. The staff members were deeply disappointed. All their hard work seemed to have been in vain, and many of them felt uncertain about the future of their team. Kyoya was stunned. Once again, he found himself facing another failure. He lowered his head in despair and accidentally dropped some documents on his desk. That night, Kyoya went back home with a heavy heart. His team had been disbanded, and his employment contract was canceled. Sitting alone in his room, he questioned what exactly had gone wrong with his life. His eyes wandered to a letter of acceptance from an art school, and he began to wonder what might have happened if he had chosen to attend that school instead. Perhaps he could have poured his heart into creating, thinking, and making something new. Perhaps he could have met the Platinum Generation, worked alongside them, and inspired each other. Frustrated, Kyoya threw the letter into the trash and cried, realizing it was all too late. Eventually, he fell asleep, only to wake up to the sound of Miyoko calling his name. When he opened his eyes, he thought Miyoko was just cosplaying, since she was wearing a high school uniform, even though she should have already graduated. Miyoko asked what he wanted to eat for the celebration. Kyoya was confused and had no idea what celebration she was talking about. Miyoko explained that he had looked so happy earlier when he was accepted into Umaka Art School. Kyoya, bewildered, replied that it had been 10 years since that happened. Miyoko, of course, didn't understand what he meant. Looking around his room, Kyoya noticed something strange. His bookshelf only had 7 volumes of Zero no Tsukaima, and several other books like Haganai, Asterisk, and No Game, No Life were missing. He also wondered why he still had a CRT monitor that he should have thrown away long ago. There was even a PlayStation 2 instead of a PlayStation 3. To his surprise, his smartphone had turned into an old flip phone. When he finally looked at the calendar, Kyoya realized that he was somehow back in the year 2006. For someone who always believed that time could never go backward and that life offered no second chances, it was shocking to find himself in the very past he had once wished to revisit, now with the possibility of making things right. Kyoya found himself back in the year 2006, and he decided to enroll at Umaka School of Arts. In April of that year, he officially began his classes there. Kyoya had no idea why this had happened to him. What he did know was that he had traveled 10 years into the past, returning to the exact moment when he was supposed to choose a university. Instead of dwelling on how strange the world could be, he chose to focus on shaping his own future. That day, Kyoya walked toward the place where he would be living during college. Carrying only the essentials, he set out to find his new residence. In his previous life, he had taken a safer, more conventional path because he doubted his own potential. That choice had led to many bitter experiences, so this time he decided to enroll in an art school to pursue the chance of a different outcome. Later that day, Kyoya arrived at the shared house called Kiriyami, which would now be his home. Before long, his belongings were delivered. He immediately began unpacking and organizing his room. After a while, exhaustion set in, and he decided to leave the rest for tomorrow. Taking a break, Kyoya grabbed a bottle of yogurt and drank it. He remembered his father's advice to eat more fermented foods like those containing lactic acid or natto because meals prepared while living alone might not always be balanced. While unpacking, Kyoya thought that becoming an art student might give him the chance to work with talented creators like Shino Akishima, Kyuichi Kawago, and Nana. Eventually, fatigue caught up with him and he fell into a deep sleep. Suddenly, he heard someone calling his name. Kyoei opened his eyes and was startled to see the president from his old workplace standing before him. The president urged him to wake up and reminded him that the Seiki Pura Ketsu project wasn't finished yet. Before he could process what was happening, debt collectors appeared and surrounded him. Confused, Kyoei thought it was all a misunderstanding. It turned out to be part of a film shoot. The president told him to run, saying that life was like filmmaking, where a second take could change everything. He encouraged Kyoei to chase after his bright future. In this second take, Kyoei sprinted toward the light, determined not to let his life end without trying again. Kyoei then woke up once more. As he opened his eyes, he saw a girl sleeping beside him. The scene felt oddly similar to a visual novel he had once worked on. At first, he thought he was still dreaming, but shock quickly set in, and he sat up abruptly. The girl slowly woke up too, rubbing her eyes. Kyoei stared at the cute stranger as she moved closer, surprising him. She was simply thirsty and reached for his yogurt without hesitation, enjoying it with delight. Curious, Kyoei asked who she was. The girl began to introduce herself, but before she could finish, she accidentally slipped and fell onto him. The noise startled the other residents of the house, and they rushed to check the source of the commotion. When they opened Kyoei's door, they were stunned to see the position the two were in. Kyoei quickly tried to explain the situation. The girl clarified that her futon hadn't arrived yet, so she ended up sleeping in Kyoei's room for the night. The four residents of the Kitayama house introduced themselves to each other in the living room. Kogure Nanako was the first to speak, sharing that she came from Shiga Prefecture. Kyoei guessed that Nanako was probably popular and had a slightly flashy gyro vibe. The guy sitting next to Nanako joked about whether Kogure sounded like the name of a crime family. Feeling offended, Nanako immediately punched him lightly in protest. The guy then introduced himself as Rokuanji Tsurayuki, and Nanako commented that the surname Tsurayuki sounded pretty cool. After that, Kyoei introduced himself. Nanako then asked Kyoei to explain what had happened since yesterday. Kyoei told them that everything was just a series of unfortunate coincidences. Tsurayuki was surprised that Kyoei had ended up sleeping next to a girl he had just met by pure accident. Nanako didn't believe the story so easily and playfully threw a pillow at Kyoei. The girl who had shared the room with Kyoei then introduced herself. Her name was Shino Aki, and she was from Fukuoka. Tsurayuki pointed out that the name Shino Aki sounded more like a boy's name. Aki explained that Shino was her family name while Aki was her given name, but Kyoei and the others ended up calling her by the nickname Shinoaki instead. Kyoei, Aki, Tsurayuki, and Nanako would now be living together in the Kitayama house. Kyoei and Aki shared the second floor, while Tsurayuki and Nanako stayed on the first floor. They divided household chores for the week, and that day it was Kyoei's turn to cook. While preparing the meal, Kyoei kept glancing at Aki and Nanako as they chatted, thinking to himself that both of them were incredibly cute. He remembered the incident from the day before and told himself he needed to be more careful to avoid any misunderstandings. That morning, Kyoei left the house with his three friends. They all turned out to be in the visual arts department. Nanako was surprised when she learned that the area they were walking through was part of Osaka, since it looked more rural compared to where she came from. It turned out to be a border area, and there had even been recent warnings about snakes. Nanako seemed uneasy at the mention of snakes, but according to Tsurayuki, there was something even more intimidating than snakes. The Unaka Art Landmark, a hill dedicated to art installations. When they finally reached the visual arts classroom, they saw that quite a lot of students had gathered there. Everyone found their assigned seats, and Kyoei and his friends split up to locate their numbers. Not long after, a muscular guy arrived and sat next to Kyoei. He introduced himself as Genkiro and looked genuinely excited to have joined the art school. Kyoei greeted him, and they started talking. Genkiro asked if Kyoei played any sports, but Kyoei admitted that he only watched baseball on TV. Genkiro began sharing stories about baseball players of that era and asked Kyoei which player he liked the most. Kyoei mentioned Udani, only to realize that Genkiro had never heard of the name. That made Kyoei suddenly remember that it was still 2006, while he himself had already lived through life up to 2016 in his previous timeline. He reminded himself to be careful with what he said. Not long after, the professor's assistant Misaki entered the classroom to give a welcome speech. Misaki suggested doing a quick survey by asking who among the students wanted to become film directors, scriptwriters, anime creators, game developers, and so on. The students eagerly raised their hands according to their interests, their faces full of excitement. But then Misaki suddenly shared a sobering fact. The Unaka Art School had 135 graduates from the visual arts department the previous year, and only 8 of them had actually found jobs. The students were shocked. Nanako guessed the number might have been around 42, but the reality was far lower, even though it was still more than the year before. Misaki explained that everyone first needed to meet their basic living needs, which required money. Games, anime, and films were forms of entertainment, and people only considered them important once their basic needs were fulfilled, which meant those industries had a lower priority. Misaki added that people entering these creative fields often walk a fine line between eccentricity and foolishness. However, if that foolishness could reach a level so extreme that no one else could replicate it, it could become something valuable. And that was exactly what Misaki hoped to see from them. If they were going to be bold, they had to take it to a level that others couldn't reach. After class ended, Kyoei reflected on what Misaki had said. It seemed that their chosen path would not be easy. He realized that the film, anime, and game industries were narrow fields where only a few names could truly rise to fame. Even those known as the Platinum Generation did not all end up shining brightly. Having already experienced the future once, Kyoei understood this reality well. There was no point in feeling discouraged so early, so he reassured himself to keep moving forward. As he was about to leave the classroom, Kyoei noticed a student ID card that had fallen out of a girl's bag. He picked it up and returned it to her, only to be stunned when he saw that it belonged to Eiko, the team leader from Succeed Soft. Without thinking, Kyoei accidentally called her leader. Eiko looked puzzled since she wasn't part of any club at school. Kyoei quickly apologized and handed her the card. After thanking him, Eiko left the room, and Kyoei couldn't believe that they were actually enrolled in the same department. He began to wonder if the entire Platinum Generation might already be present in that very classroom. After that, the visual arts class began, but Kyoei and his friends didn't start making a film right away. They first spent time observing the senior students and learning everything they could about filmmaking. Once the observation session ended, Kyoei quickly headed to his next class. On the way, he happened to see Eiko managing a film production. Kyoei wasn't surprised at all to see her in the spotlight, and he silently admired her skills. Later, while attending a screenwriting theory class, Kyoei began to worry about whether he could ever reach the level of the so-called Platinum Generation. During a lecture, Soriyuki fell asleep, clearly exhausted from working late the night before. Kyoei tried to wake him, but it was obvious that Soriyuki was still tired. Meanwhile, Nanako and Aki looked relaxed, almost unmotivated, which oddly enough gave Kyoei a sense of relief. He thought that if everyone around him were as intense and driven as Eiko, he might feel overwhelmed in class. At that moment, the professor explained that there are 10 key elements to consider when writing a script. However, he only listed 8 of them and then asked the students to identify the remaining 2. Eriko eagerly raised her hand and answered that one of the missing elements was complication, which refers to unexpected developments in the story that often lead to setbacks for the protagonist. She explained that a perfect main character wouldn't be interesting without flaws, and by introducing complications, a story naturally creates more drama. The professor praised her response and asked her to provide the final element. Instead of answering again, Eiko playfully called on Soriyuki, who was still half asleep, to give the last one. The professor chuckled, calling Eiko both clever and a little mischievous. The professor then turned to Soriyuki, asking him to share his answer. Still waking up, Soriyuki received a quiet hint from Kyoei that the professor wanted the final element. After thinking for a moment, Soriyuki replied that it was the role of the antagonist. He explained that the enemy of the protagonist could be a person or an organization, and among the 10 elements, this one is especially important for maintaining tension until the story reaches its climax. The professor praised his answer and remarked that Soriyuki's insight was impressively complex. Soriyuki thanked him, while his classmates were surprised that he had come up with such a sharp response. Seeing this, Kyoei realized he couldn't afford to relax as much as he had previously thought. During the lunch break, Kyoei sat with Soriyuki, Nanako, and Aki in the cafeteria, chatting about the class. Everyone was impressed by Soriyuki's answer, but he humbly said that he had only repeated something he had read in a book. Nanako admitted she didn't expect the usually intimidating professor to praise him. Soriyuki joked that the professor was probably just being kind to the new students. He then invited Nanako to join him for the 3rd period visual arts theory class, and the two of them left together. After they were gone, Aki commented that Soriyuki was amazing, while she herself didn't feel confident in any particular specialty, which made it harder for her to keep up. Kyoei admitted he felt the same way. He had once believed that the extra 10 years of life experience he carried with him would give him an advantage, especially since he had some exposure to the entertainment industry, but he was starting to realize that his basic knowledge was still lacking. His shallow experience alone wasn't enough to match real talent or deep understanding. While thinking about this, Kyoei suddenly noticed Aki looking at him. Surprised, he almost spilled his drink. Aki asked why he seemed so worried. Kyoei quickly said it was nothing serious, which made Aki feel relieved. Curious, Kyoei asked why Aki chose to attend an art school. He mentioned that he had seen her completely focused during a photography class and wondered if she might want to become a camera operator. Just then, Genkiro suddenly appeared and startled Kyoei. Surprised, Kyoei asked why Genkiro was wearing such an unusual outfit. Genkiro explained that it was the uniform of his club, a ninjutsu study club. Apparently, only Umaka University in Japan had such a club. However, it seemed that Genkiro's real reason for joining was because of a senior Komochi member he admired. Aki laughed, saying Genkiro looked like he was having a great time in the club. Genkiro encouraged both Kyoya and Aki to join as well, assuring them it was a lot of fun. After that, Kyoya and Aki headed straight to the club room, but when they arrived, it didn't see a single student there. A few moments later, two senior members called out to them from upstairs and invited Kyoya and Aki to join their club activity. Everyone was holding a welcome party for the new students of 2006, celebrating together with a cheerful toast. Kyoya looked a bit worried, wondering if it was really okay for them to join even though they hadn't decided to become members of the club. According to Aki, it was fine since the seniors hadn't asked them about that at all. They all enjoyed the late afternoon atmosphere, having fun together until the sun began to set. While Kyoya was about to start a conversation with Aki, Sayori unexpectedly fell asleep on his shoulder. Kyoya couldn't help but smile as he looked at her. Later that night, Kyoya carried Aki on his back as they walked home. Halfway through the walk, Aki woke up. She apologized for troubling him, but Kyoya assured her it was no problem. He understood that she was exhausted since they had been busy ever since the entrance ceremony. Aki commented that Kyoya was surprisingly dependable, even admitting that she was a little surprised they were actually the same age. To her, Kyoya seemed to care about everyone and remained calm for someone who was just 20, though at times he looked tired from thinking too much. Aki mentioned that during lunch earlier, Kyoya appeared very worried, but he still insisted that he wasn't seriously overthinking anything. Aki playfully pinched Kyoya's cheek and encouraged him to tell the truth so he could feel better. Kyoya finally admitted that when he saw Tsurayuki confidently answering questions in class, he felt like he couldn't do anything. It wasn't just Tsurayuki. Everyone around him seemed to have their own special strengths. His concern came from feeling as if he had no unique talent at all. Aki, however, didn't see it that way. She told him she actually thought he could do many things. Kyoya could cook for himself, do laundry, and take out the trash properly. He was even good at making plans and sticking to them. Aki confessed that she couldn't do any of those things and felt envious of people who could. She believes Tsurayuki probably felt the same way too, and she was sure there were things about Kyoya that others would envy. According to Aki, people who feel like they can't do anything often work hard to find something they can do. She was certain that the people Kyoya thought were amazing probably had their own worries as well. Aki gently patted Kyoya's head, and he thanked her for listening to his thoughts. Aki then admitted that she also needed to keep working hard. Hearing this made Kyoya think more seriously about what he himself could accomplish. When they finally arrived home, they noticed that Nanako and Tsurayuki weren't there, most likely because they were still working. Aki headed straight to her room to sleep, while Kyoya, feeling very tired, wanted to go to bed as well. He suddenly remembered that he forgot to return Aki's bag, so he went to her room to give it back. When he entered, he was surprised to see Aki working on a character design sketch. That was when Kyoya realized that Aki was actually Akishima Shino, someone who would later become part of the future Platinum generation. He recalled Aki's earlier words about how people who feel like they can't do anything will try hard to find what they can do, and he understood that this was exactly what Aki was doing. At that moment, Kyoya thought deeply about how he needed to discover something he truly wanted to do and something he could pursue with his own effort. Aki scolded Tsurayuki for eating her ramen without permission. Tsurayuki apologized and offered to make it up to her by buying sukiyaki instead. Aki pointed out that the soy sauce flavor of sukiyaki was completely different from her own Yu Makotoya tonkatsu flavor. Tsurayuki and Aki kept arguing while Kyoya could only watch. Nanako stepped out of her room and reminded Tsurayuki that eating someone else's food was something he should never do when they were all living together. Nanako was surprised when the three of them suddenly went silent and stared at her. Kyoya then pointed out something about her clothes. When Nanako looked down at herself, she was shocked to realize she was not wearing a top. Her face turned bright red and she quickly covered herself before hurrying back to her room. She had not noticed that she was in the middle of changing clothes. Kyoya felt a sharp pain from the reflexive smack Nanako gave him in her panic. Up to that point, Kyoya still could not understand why he had returned to the world of 10 years ago, with all of his memories intact, something that could only be described as a time leap. His second chance at college life was already filled with late-night ramen and nervous stomach aches. Along with his housemates, Kyoya was determined to create a real project, even though he had no idea what awaited them on their journey. The next day, Misaki taught a class that Kyoya attended. She explained the 4 key elements of making a film and asked the students to form groups of 4 so that each person could handle one part of the project. Their assignment was to create a short film lasting 3 minutes, which would then be screened for the class. Nanako was surprised that it meant everyone would watch their work, while Aki was excited and wanted them to make something impressive. The theme of the project was time. After class, Kyoya and Sorayuki played baseball on the field while discussing their plan. Sorayuki suggested naming their team Kitayama. Kyoya divided the roles. Sorayuki would handle directing, Aki would take the technical side, Nanako would manage execution, and Kyoya himself would oversee production. Sorayuki wanted to write the script but admitted he was not interested in the on-site work. Later that day, Kyoya and Nanako went to their part-time jobs, surprised to find out they worked at the same place. Nanako mentioned that the manager gave her a strange look because she and Kyoya shared the same address. Curious, Kyoya asked why Nanako had chosen an art university and what she wanted to do there. Nanako said she had no special reason, and that maybe she had simply grown tired of Lake Biwa. She shared how, back in grade school, she once believed Lake Biwa was the ocean because of how enormous it looked. She was sure Kyoya might have thought the same if he had seen it. Nanako reminisced about her old neighborhood, where there were towns and shopping areas, but explained that if she had never left her home, she would never have known what the ocean really looked like. Time passed without her realizing it, and before she knew it, she had arrived in a completely new place. She admitted it felt like she was still searching for her identity. Hearing this, Kyoya remembered experiencing something similar himself. While Kyoya was about to place a drink on the wrong shelf, Nanako reached up to help him put it on the top rack. As she leaned forward, she accidentally bumped into him. She quickly apologized and asked him to hold still for a moment while she finished arranging the drinks. Kyoya stayed calm, silently reminding himself that even though he looked like a young college student again, his mind was still that of a 28-year-old adult. He thanked Nanako for her help, and they soon finished their shift. The next day, Kyoya met with Misaki to submit the names and roles of his team members, though he admitted that he still had no idea what their project would be about. Misaki encouraged him by saying that inspiration could come from anywhere and asked if anything interesting had happened to him lately that he could use. Kyoya recalled the moment when Nanako had stepped out of her room while changing in the awkward accident at work. His face flushed at the memory, and he quickly excused himself from the room, realizing he needed to decide on their concept soon. When Kyoya arrived home that evening, he found Aki asleep at her desk, having dozed off while studying. He gently woke her, and she greeted him sleepily, sharing that she had been dreaming of eating a mountain of Edoshima oysters. Kyoya apologized for waking her from such a pleasant dream and asked why she had chosen to attend an art university. Aki admitted that she never felt particularly talented at anything and thought it would be good to try something where she might discover what she could do. She confessed that even back in grade school, she was not good at studying and often missed her train. Since she grew up in the countryside, missing a train meant waiting 30 minutes for the next one, and the station staff even came to recognize her over time. Inspired by Aki's story, Kyoya came up with an idea that fit the theme of time. That night, he gathered his team and shared his plan to make a short film about a train station. When Nanako asked why, Kyoya explained that a station was a place everyone could easily picture, which made it perfect for establishing the setting in a 3-minute film. He felt that a station, where people come and go and time constantly moves forward, was the ideal backdrop for their project. Nanako agreed, and Aki also mentioned that everyone used the train. Kyoya explained that since the station had been in the same place for a long time, it would be easy to show the passage of time there. He thought it could be used to tell the story of a woman's life within 3 minutes, and it might look interesting if the events were aligned to happen in a single day. Nanako liked the idea because she thought it was really good, and Aki was excited to see how it would turn out. However, Sorayuki asked for 30 minutes to think about it first. Sorayuki went to his room, leaving Aki confused about what was bothering him. After a while, Sorayuki came out carrying a plot outline based on Kyoya's earlier explanation. Kyoya looked happy after reading it. Aki praised Sorayuki for being able to create a plot so quickly. Everyone agreed with the idea, and Kyoya asked Sorayuki to write the full script. But suddenly, Sorayuki called Kyoya aside to talk. Sorayuki handed Kyoya a small piece of paper containing notes of his own idea. Kyoya was shocked when he read it because it was exactly the same as the idea he had just shared. Kyoya insisted that he had never seen those notes before. Sorayuki explained that he had locked the notes in a box, so there was no way Kyoya could have read them. He wondered if Kyoya had somehow read his mind, which made him feel like his idea had been stolen. That was why he had rushed to write the plot. Sorayuki admitted that it was scary how similar their thoughts were. Kyoya then realized how the idea had come to him. It turned out it was inspired by short stories he had read in the future, stories about a woman's life portrayed with a train station as the setting. His memory of those stories had sparked the same impression, and in a way, it was as if he had borrowed Sorayuki's idea from the future. Sorayuki asked if it was just a coincidence or something more, but Kyoya could only stay silent. Sorayuki smiled and said it was impossible anyway, then apologized, thinking it must have been pure coincidence. Sorayuki was pleased because the station's setting worked well for character behavior and events, something anyone studying scriptwriting would naturally notice. Yet it seemed no one at the university had realized it, so he had planned to create a simple project and focus on his own studies. However, working with Kyoya made it possible to create something much better. Kyoya felt excited at the thought of surprising their professors with the project they were about to make. The next day, Kyoya and his friends began working on the project. Sorayuki was in charge of the script, Aki handled the design, and Nanako provided the voice acting. They kept discussing the project everywhere they went. One day at a cafe, Kyoya asked Sorayuki to shorten the script because if they followed the current version, the film would exceed the 3-minute limit. He requested a rewrite, but Sorayuki hesitated. He explained that the script was already the result of careful thought and represented his best version, so it wouldn't be easy to shorten it. Instead, Sorayuki suggested that Aki adjust the storyboard to fit the limited time, and Aki agreed to try. He also asked Nanako to speed up her lines to help reduce the runtime, but Nanako was unsure if she could do that without testing it first. Sorayuki said they wouldn't know unless they tried. Kyoya began to worry because their project had a strict time limit. No matter how good the film turned out, if it went over the limit, they would fail. He wondered if this reason was enough to convince Sorayuki. Finally, Kyoya explained that if their project didn't follow the rules, they wouldn't receive a grade. Disappointed, Sorayuki reluctantly agreed to shorten the script. Before leaving, he asked if this was Kyoya's way of keeping their promise to create something truly great. Kyoya felt terrible after hearing that. Later, Kyoya walked around the school with Aki and Nanako. Nanako commented that Sorayuki was extremely perfectionistic and Aki told Kyoya not to worry too much about it. Suddenly, Nanako accidentally stepped on someone. It turned out to be one of their seniors, who asked them to escort him to the club room because he couldn't move due to hunger. When they arrived at the room, the door was suddenly closed by someone and a few people jumped out to surprise them. The seniors were overjoyed because their club president had successfully brought in new students, which meant they could avoid budget cuts for the 3rd year in a row. They apologized for tricking Kyoya and the others and begged Kyoya to join their club. Kyoya said he didn't have time to participate, but Aki showed interest and Nanako agreed to try if it was only a trial period. Kyoya was shocked by their responses. Hearing this, the seniors cheered in excitement. The club president then introduced himself as Takashi, a 5th-year student majoring in photography. He handed Kyoya a brochure about the club. After returning home, Kyoya still didn't have the courage to face Sorayuki in his room. Instead, he went to the station to observe the location for the film he planned to create. There, he unexpectedly met Eiko. Eiko was surprised to find out that Kyoya's team was also planning to shoot a film at the station, just like her team. She was confident that her team wouldn't lose to Kyoya's, even though she didn't know what kind of film he was making. Eiko openly admitted that her team aimed to achieve the highest score. Not wanting to be underestimated, Eiko asked about his film's concept, the key elements, and how his team planned to use their 3-minute time limit. Since Kyoya was part of the production team, she felt he should be able to explain those details. Eiko reminded him not to take filmmaking lightly. After that conversation, Kyoya went to meet Misaki to submit the application form for his team's film project. Misaki immediately stamped the form and mentioned that she understood the kind of worries the production side usually faced. She had even heard about the arguments within Kyoya's team. Misaki then showed him a script from a previous project that had gained a lot of attention and even seemed like it could win awards. However, despite the initial excitement, the film's reputation ended up being poor. The director and cast apparently acted without proper coordination. The runtime was too long and the pacing was ruined, wasting the strength of the story. Misaki explained that a script is not a finished product, and when a project is still at the script stage, it doesn't mean it's doomed to fail. The real danger comes when the production side gives up. That's when a project truly collapses. Just like Eiko had said earlier, Kyoya needed to take the process of filmmaking seriously. Misaki also reminded him that everyone involved in creating a film is a creator, so there's no hierarchy of importance. Kyoya thanked Misaki and headed home. On the way, he realized that time might feel limitless, but nothing would ever change unless he took action. He immediately went to see Sorayuki and apologized, asking if they could talk things over once more. Sorayuki told him to do as he wished since the issue was already in the past. But Kyoya insisted that nothing had truly started yet. He agreed with Sorayuki's earlier words that they were only about to begin filming and editing, and he wanted to discuss everything again. Concerns about the runtime could be dealt with later. Hearing this, Sorayuki smiled and regained his motivation. Aki and Nanako felt relieved to see the two of them reconcile. The next day, the 4 of them went to the station to start shooting their video. However, something unexpected happened. The camera that Sorayuki had borrowed turned out not to be a video camera. Sorayuki was shocked to realize this mistake. Someone suggested finding another camera, but Kyoei rejected the idea because it would take too much time. Sorayuki felt guilty, and Aki pointed out that there seemed to be no other option. Hearing that phrase, Kyoei was struck by how often he had said something similar in the past. Words he had regretted for the last 10 years of his life. But now he had a second chance. He realized he had a choice. Either keep making excuses and achieve nothing, or keep moving forward for the next 10 years. Kyoei declared that they were not out of options.